I appreciate you stopping by to check out yet another episode of Vintage Audio Review. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about this Altec Model 1570b power amplifier. Now it is a monoblock amplifier, and in 1958 it sold for $348, or about $3,700 today. It was rated at a power output of 175 watts. They didn't specify what load it was into, at not more than 5% THD from 65 Hertz to 20 kilohertz, and it had a frequency response from 10 Hertz to 50 kilohertz of plus or minus 1 dB. Now, this particular unit has been modified. The aesthetics are definitely different than the original. I do not know what other electrical changes were made to this, and there is a second unit. Now, these originally were seen in the Paragon video that I did, and in fact somebody questioned as to when I was going to do a review on the amplifiers, and this is what you're seeing here. I'm only doing one amplifier. I'll assume that the other one would perform nearly the same. Now, it does have a few cosmetic changes to it, and you will see a video in a little bit that shows another amplifier that was purchased as part of this set that has the original state of the unit more or less, so you can kind of compare. And you'll see a tour of it in the front and the back, and then we'll go over the data, and then I will discuss my listening experience with it. As just a mono amplifier with just one loudspeaker. So let me go into the little tour, and then I will talk about my experience with it. So this is what the Altec amplifier looks like in its natural state. I believe that it fit in a rack at a movie theater, I would imagine, and this is kind of what it would look like. I believe there was a screen on the top part. You can just kind of see where a screen would slide in, and then there was probably a cover plate on it, but at least kind of this tells you what it looked like to start with before it was modified. Kind of a little bit different view from the top. Here is a little closer view of the Altec 1570b mono power amplifier, and we'll start over here on the left. Here's our RCA input, and that's an add-on. I imagine this probably had a 1/4 inch phono jack input to start with. We have our volume gain control here. Here is a power indicator light, which is burned out on this particular unit, and then we have our on-off switch here. We have our 12AX7 here, and it has kind of this little ring around it that's just for aesthetics. We have a couple filter caps here. This is an oil can cap. I'm imagining this big transformer here is the high voltage transformer, and probably this guy right here is the transformer for the output to the speakers. And then I'm thinking this guy right here and this guy right here are chokes. We do have a 6SN7 right here, and these two tubes right there would be the 6W6 GTs. These 4 tubes right here are the 4 GY tubes, and then these big monster tubes here that take about 900 volts to them are the 811A tubes. And I'm going to go ahead and power this on just so you can see how bright these guys glow. So they glow rather brightly. This obviously is the rear of the 1570b, and nothing really exciting going on. We do have a grounding lug here that's gold plated, and our speaker connections are here. There's taps for 16, 8, and 32 ohm speakers, and we have a replaceable fuse here. I'm guessing that that was not original, as this was not original. is our standard THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz with the 1570b putting out about 5 watts into 8 ohms. I did adjust the gain to give 25 dB, and you can see that our THD is right at 1%. Our SNR is about 58 dB. And you can kind of see it looks pretty noisy here. We do have the power supply hums at less than 60 dBd down from our peak here at 0. And it looks fairly noisy, I would say, but overall it's not tremendously bad. I mean, our THD plus noise is still at 1%. If you're curious what the harmonics look like, here we go. And what's very interesting is we have our second harmonic, which would be the even harmonic, is less than the third harmonic. So that's kind of contrary to what you see with tube amplifiers. Typically the second or even harmonic would be higher than the third harmonic or odd harmonic, but that is the way this particular amplifier is working. Here is the frequency response of the 1570b with it putting out about 5 watts into 8 ohms, and the gain is set for 25 dB. We're going from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and we do have a lot of this little noise stuff going on. I'm not really sure what's causing that. It is fairly flat, actually, and at worst case, once we get in the high end of the band, we're down maybe 1.4 dB or so. Here is the output impedance of the 1570b amplifier. Now this is using the 8 ohm taps and into an 8 ohm load, at least for part of the test. And if we look at, say, 1 kilohertz, for the most part, the output impedance is in this area here. We'll call that about 1.2. And if we use that, that equates to a damping factor of about 6.6. There is a specification for the output impedance of the 1570b, and it's kind of an odd one. It says less than 10% of the nominal load impedance. In this case, with an 8 ohm load, 10% of that would be 0.8 ohms. So we are above that, not a ton. 0.8 ohms would be, say, here, and so we're a bit above that with 1.2. But anyway, that's kind of what the output impedance looks like. This plot shows the system noise of the 1570b amplifier with the input terminated into a short. There is actually a specification that says the output noise should be less than minus 25 dBm, which would be about minus 46 dBV. So that would be right in this area here. So if you look at this top 60 hertz spur here, we'll call that the noise level. The max noise level, that we probably would be just meeting this specification requirement. In case you were wondering what the multi-tone response of the 1570b looked like, here it is. This would equate to about, maybe 8 bits of distortion-free range. Here's our THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz, and in this plot I have adjusted the front panel gain control of the 1570b to maximum, which is 30.76 dB, and we're putting out about 18.6 watts into 8 ohms. Our THD is not overly bad at 1.44%, and our SNR is about 59 dB. So this shows the maximum gain that the unit gets. There's a specification that says the gain of the amplifier is 72 dB. I'm not sure once again whether this unit has been modified at some point, but we're about half of that. This plot shows the THD versus frequency for a couple different output power levels, and that's into 8 ohms from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. The worst case THD is down here at the low part of the band. Once we get about at maybe 30 hertz, we're less than like 3% THD, and then once we get down to about 40 hertz, we're in the less than 2% THD, which is kind of where this thing lands most of the time at these power levels. Now the -3 is the equivalent of about 19.5 watts into 8 ohms, and it gets 3 dB lower until we get to -12, and that's about 2.5 watts into 8 ohms. Here's our THD SNR plot at 1 kilohertz, and in this case I have boosted the input signal level up until the distortion was about 2% THD. Our gain was still set for about 25 dB, and we're putting out about almost 52 watts into 8 ohms. SNR's at 59 dB, and you can kind of see it looks kind of noisy. If you look at the harmonic plot, let me bring that over. The second harmonic is just a little bit higher than the third harmonic. This is kind of like your standard tube harmonic comparison, where the even harmonics are typically higher than the odd harmonic. So at least that is kind of working a little bit, but it does have a lot of distortion. This thing did have a specification that it should have not more than 3% THD at 165 watts. We'll go ahead and boost this up and see where we're at when we hit 3% THD, how much more we can go here on the power level. So let me go start this thing up a little bit, and we'll start increasing the signal level. So right here, to hit the 3% THD, we're at about 57 watts, and that's going to be about it. For this amplifier, I have no idea where they got their specs from, but probably is modified somewhat, but the 3% THD at 165 watts is not going to happen with this particular amplifier, but still, it's still not bad for a extremely old tube amp. Overall, the data was not overly impressive on this unit as far as the normal specs. The THD at just a little bit over 50 watts into 8 ohms was about 2%, and that's quite a big number. Whether you really hear that or not is debatable. I guess it depends on what you're listening to, but I kind of don't like to go over 1% when I'm doing my measurements. And in that case, you're down to around, I think, maybe 10, 11 watts, and this thing was less than 1%. And if you're playing into an efficient speaker like this guy is, it's going into a Paragon, or at least two of them are going into a Paragon. It has plenty of power to play the Paragon at decent levels without getting a lot of distortion from the amplifier. Let's say not more than 1%. And it does do a good job with the Paragon as far as the sound that I heard with the Paragon and this. It does seem to be a pretty good matching. One thing I didn't really point out earlier is that these leads that go to the two 811 tubes carry a bit over 900 volts. So it's kind of a dangerous condition to kind of have exposed like that the way this amplifier is. A lot of people keep them with the original cage on. There's a cage that goes on the front here and then the top, but for the aesthetic reasons, this particular builder of this guy removed that, and you just have to be careful that you don't touch those leads while the amplifier is running. You could get a nasty shock. As far as listening, I connected up just one of my Wilson Watt 3 Puppy 2 loudspeakers, and once I gave it a chance to warm up, I didn't hear any hiss, but I did hear the 60 hertz, 120 hertz hum that you saw in the data. It really wasn't that loud at all, and it went away when I was a few feet away from the speaker. I was actually quite surprised at how low level it was, and during listening I did not hear it at all. Now, as far as listening, I thought the sound was okay, but I felt that the bass was lacking a bit, and maybe some of that was due to just using one speaker, but I have heard these hooked up to the Paragon. If you saw the Paragon video, or go watch that video, these drive the Paragon just fine, and there's plenty of bass. So once again, if you liked the video, click your thumb up icon on the page. I love to hear your comments, and I almost always reply to them. Sometimes they're in a different language, so I have to use Google Translate, but I will try to reply to them as best I can. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, that would be a good thing to help the channel grow. And until next time, have a great day or night.